Hey girl, I'm Jamie Constantine. I'm a wife, mom of 2 teenage boys, and a multi-passionate female entrepreneur. I have a vision of a world of confident women who love themselves wholeheartedly. This is my new happy place, and I hope that it becomes yours too. So toss your hair up in that messy bun, grab your cup of coffee, get comfortable, and let's dive in. Welcome to the Happy Girl Podcast. Looking for a little retail therapy and want to shop from the comfort of your own home? Head on over to happygirlpodcast.com, click on our sponsors, and check out None of Your Business Boutique. Enter discount code HAPPYGIRL to save $5 off your purchase. Hey ladies, welcome back to another episode of the Happy Girl Podcast. I'm your host, Jamie Constantine, and I think at some point we all fall into caregiving at one point or another in our lives, especially as women. So whether that's caring for a child, a spouse, maybe a parent, or even a grandparent. And that's one of the reasons why I'm really happy and thankful to have Adrian Glessman here on the show with us today. Adrian Glessman, am I saying your last name right?
You actually are. I was thinking about it. I was like, wow, she didn't even ask me. That's awesome.
That's the one thing I forgot to ask.
No worries. You got it. You got it. I was really impressed.
Adrian Glessman is a professional speaker, ambassador, and advocate on the topic of millennial caregiving, sharing her story and journey as an only child caregiver to her mom, Hetty, who passed away in 2020 after living with multiple system atrophy since 2010. Adrian's story as Hetty's caregiver was featured in a Wall Street Journal article. The call to care for aging parents comes sooner now. Her story has also been featured in Health Magazine, Toronto Sun, and Vox.com, just to name a few. In addition to keynoting national conferences for leading age national church residences and the Multiple System Atrophy Coalition, Adrienne she's also been involved with various caregiving campaigns, including serving as a caregiver ambassador for EMD, Serrano's Embracing Carers, Leading Ages Carry the Convo, and the Scan Foundation's Do You Give a Care? You do so much, Adrienne, and I can't wait to dive into this episode with you because I feel the topic is extremely important and I really love the opportunity to have a conversation with you and see how you can share your experience, your knowledge, and any perspective that you might have as a caregiver. If you can say hi to our listeners and please tell us even more about yourself.
Hi. Well, first, Jamie, thank you so much for having me on. It's such a pleasure. My name is Adrienne Glusman, as Jamie said. I am a former caregiver. I actually started my caregiving journey when I was 29 years old. I am an only child of divorced parents. So when my caregiving journey started, it was a bit of a jolt in that there wasn't really anyone to lean on or turn to for advice. Let me back it up a little bit. At the time, I was actually living in New York City, and my mom was back in Florida, which is where I'm from. So after college, I moved to New York City. I was living like the young 20-something, like Sex and the City, glamorous lifestyle of New York, trying to figure out what I wanted to do for a career, dating, hanging out with friends, all the things that you do in your 20s. So I didn't really notice anything different about my mom. I do remember that she had told me that she was diagnosed with Parkinson's disease, which at the time it wasn't hearing like a cancer diagnosis or a disease diagnosis that you have more familiarity with. Parkinson's was not very well known to me. And I didn't really see many changes in my mom, so I didn't really think twice about it. And I kept on with my life in New York City. But I say that there is a pivotal milestone, which really was the turning point that fast forwarded me into caregiving. And that was one day in 2011. I always talked to my mom on the way to work. And this one day, she didn't answer the phone. And as all of us working women know, you start the day and the next thing you know, it's like 3, 4 o'clock in the afternoon, and I still hadn't heard from my mom. So I started getting a little bit panicky, and I knew from talking to my mom the night before that she was going to have a friend meet her for dinner. So I reached out to the friend and I said, hey, I have this sneaky suspicion that something's not right. So fast forward, the friend goes over. Turns out my mom had, I don't know if she tripped or passed out, whatever it was, but she was out cold on the floor of her bedroom. We have no idea how many hours she was out cold. And that was kind of like that pivotal moment, that pivotal point where I knew that my life was going to change forever. So initially, I was able to manage mom's care from a distance. I continued living in New York City. At first, it was more like, okay, well, she can't live alone. So let's try to get one of those life alert systems, those little life alerts that you see commercials and infomercials for. Let's get her a life alert so that at least there's some level of protection there. Then I started moving into, well, let me start taking over some of her bills and finances because things started seeming like a little bit out of whack. Things weren't getting paid. But again, I was still able to manage it all from a distance and seemingly keep living my quote unquote glamorous New York City life. But then as time progressed, I got mom moved into an independent living facility so that she would no longer be living on her own. And I thought that that would allow me to breathe a big sigh of relief. Well, it did maybe a little bit, but my mom had Parkinson's, which was eventually re-diagnosed as multiple system atrophy. And that is a neurodegenerative disease, meaning that there's no cure. She's only going to get worse and worse and worse. So that's exactly what I was seeing happening. I was living up in New York City, and at the drop of a hat, I would have to book a one-way ticket home to Florida because my mom fell, or she ended up in the hospital, or she had a stroke. So my anxiety levels were starting to get pretty out of control. Even though I wanted to maintain my life in New York City, I had such stress and anxiety about what was going on with my mom back in Florida because my parents are divorced. I don't have any siblings. We had no family in Florida. So it was just me. So in 2015, after various declines on mom's end, I finally made the decision to give up my life in New York City, give up the friends that I had made, give up this life that I had led for the past decade, give up my dream job. I had actually just got offered this job that I had been going after for years. I gave it all up and decided that I needed to move back to Florida to be with my mom, to help take care of her. Now, my mom and I always say it was my mom and I against the world. We were best friends, and my mom gave up everything in her life when I was a child to be able to provide for me. So I always knew that one day I was going to fall into a role where I would have to take care of her, like I saw her take care of her parents. I just didn't think that day would come until 30 years down the road, not when I'm in my early 30s. So I moved back to Florida. And that was something I never said that I would ever do. I am a huge wanderlust. I moved to New York City. I wanted to live in California one day, maybe even live abroad one day. But here I was back in Florida, starting from square one. And I was now caring for my mom close by. So we weren't living together. My mom actually moved into an assisted living facility. But I wasn't one of those people that just decided to put their loved one in a facility and say, bye, mom, bye, dad, that's it, you're taken care of. I was there 25, 30 hours a week. I would go after work. I would go on the weekends to see her, to be with her, to be very hands-on in her care. I actually was working a traditional 9 to 5, and as many people know that are caregivers, it's pretty impossible to work a 9 to 5 job and caregive at the same time. Like, something had to give. So I wasn't really crazy about the career field that I was in. So I thought to myself, well, I don't really like what I'm doing, and I want to be able to dedicate more time to being with my mom. So I quit my job and I decided to become an entrepreneur. And I built up a project management business that I ran. I could work from home, and it allowed me so much more space and freedom to be able to care for my mom. Now, I thought it was absolutely crazy for trying to build a business while caring for my mom, because all of us entrepreneurs out there know how much time and energy and blood, sweat, and tears go into building a business, but also caring for my mom at the same time. So that afforded me a lot of luxury in that I was able to be by her side, work from her apartment at the assisted living. I joke and say that my laptop has seen the inside of emergency rooms and hospital rooms more time than any other laptop, because I would always take it with me when she was admitted to the hospital or in the ER. So being able to care for my mom in close proximity definitely brought its own share of challenges. Here I was in my 30s caring for my mom. I'm still single. I am trying to build a business, and I'm seeing everybody around me starting to get married and have kids and buy their first home. And I felt like I was, for the first time in my life, not on the same playing field as a lot of my friends. I was here. I always say it's like that movie. I don't know if it's like Finding Nemo or Finding Dory, where they're like, just keep swimming. Like, I felt like I was just trying to keep swimming while everybody else was like moving forward with their life. So long story short, mom continued to go through various declines. And in August of 2020, she got a urinary tract infection, which was nothing uncommon for her. And this time it just didn't get better, which was a huge shock to me, because when you caregive for someone, especially with a degenerative disease, you know that they won't be here forever, but you also don't think it will come as soon as it does. So I had to go through all the steps of enlisting hospice care and making all of these like massive executive decisions for my mom's end of life. And then she ended up passing away on August 26th of 2020. So I have now said I am graduated from caregiving. I'm on a new journey, which I call my grief journey, because grief is a whole nother battle. But it's definitely been an interesting ride and roller coaster. But one thing I do say is that no matter the physical, emotional, mental toll that caregiving put on me, being a primary caregiver for 10 years, now that I'm able to look back, I always say that it was and always will be my highest honor in life to have had the opportunity and the privilege to care for my mom for all those years.
That's such an extremely powerful story to hear, especially because it's something that is still very fresh. And like you're saying, you're in that next chapter, right? You're still going through, number one, like that grief phase. And I think it's absolutely admirable for you to share your story as far as how it was from the beginning, right? Where you imagined what your life would be like.
Mhm.
And I know even from seeing your Instagram and following you since we've had a little chance to connect with one another,
Yes.
you live I can tell that you live this very colorful life,
Right.
and you have this sparkle in your heart and your soul.
Mhm.
So, for someone that has so much passion and drive to have, number one, made that move to go out, explore, see what the world had to offer you, and there's so much excitement. It could be
Mhm.
scary, but for you, that was an exciting time. It was a time for you to learn, to grow, and to really start living the life that you maybe dreamed of.
Yes.
And when your mom was sick and you finally made that decision to take that bold move, that's a big step and that's a big decision to say, all right, I'm just going to leave it behind and do what I feel in my heart to take care of my mom.
Mhm.
I appreciate you sharing that with us, and I know that's a really big decision to make. Um, One of the things that I wanna also, I guess, give you credit for, my husband's like, What's your credit good for? I'm like, I give her credit. People are going to be able to cash that in one day. But I think the fact that during your caregiving time, especially when it was a learning experience for you, you didn't know, right? You did the little things,
Yeah.
what you thought you could,
Yep.
went with it, learned as you went.
Yeah.
And you also managed to find it within yourself to become an entrepreneur, to start a business,
Mhm.
now start learning something new.
Right.
That's really great. And do you think in doing that, that kind of gave you something maybe to focus on, or I don't want to say lessen the burden, but maybe lighten the weight that was on your shoulders?
So I've always been my entire life, like I've always been that like overachiever. Like I would always get the award in school for going the extra mile. So for me, deciding to embark on entrepreneurship was something that was twofold. Like I mentioned, it was not only because I was not settled in my career and I always knew that there was something more that I needed to be doing. I wanted the freedom to be able to be my own boss, have my own schedule, but it was twofold in that it also allowed me to show up for my mom more. Now, there was already enough stress on my shoulders as a caregiver. So then adding like entrepreneurship into the mix added even more stress. And I could have easily just said, well, no, I'm just going to stick with my 9 to 5, even though A, I don't like it. And B, it causes me a lot of stress and anxiety in terms of being able to show up for my mom. But one of the things that I always said to myself during my care journey, and I think it's important for anyone who is currently a caregiver or who will fall into caregiving, is that there is going to be a day that my mom is not here anymore. And I don't want to be left with nothing. I had the, I like to say privilege, even though I was a caregiver, I wasn't living with my mom 24/7. I've heard so many stories of caregivers who are 24/7 caregivers, and it's very, very hard to be able to do or focus on anything outside of caregiving. But for me, in the situation that I was in, I knew that I couldn't let 10 years just go by without continuing to be Adrienne, continuing to maintain my identity, because when you become a caregiver, you take on this whole new identity. And if you're not careful, it can completely engulf you and you can completely forget the person that you were before caregiving and the person that you really still are. So, yes, I do think that having a business helped. I wouldn't say lighten the load, but it gave me like a little bit of light at the end of the tunnel in terms of still being able to do something for me and being able to grow a business that, even when my mom was no longer here, would continue to help fuel me forward towards my passions and my goals and the things that I want out of life.
As women, we rarely put ourselves first. Isn't it time to pamper yourself? I want to tell you about Bella Body Contouring Spa, an unrivaled health spa located in Trinity, Florida. Bella Body Contouring offers an exclusive collection of non-invasive body contouring services that will help you achieve your body contouring goals. Through advanced techniques and the use of FDA-approved technology, their team of technicians delivers high-end results at the level care you need. Their services are designed to tighten, smooth, reduce, and renew your skin so you can get back to life feeling your best. Be bold, feel free, and beautiful, and leave confident. Mention this ad and take 10% off any service. That makes a lot of sense, and I really like the way that you say that. And if anybody is actually in the position where they have to even think about that right now, if they're in that place where they have to start making those decisions to be like, what am I going to do? You know, if they're in a career, if they're not in the same state, if they have their family that they're taking care of, or other obligations in their life, and they're probably in that place right now where they're like, what am I going to do? I think it's a really good way to look at it, in the idea that you were able to kind of leave things behind, but still able to have something to hold on to and look forward to in the future as well. One of the questions that I'm wondering too is, during that time, like you're saying, not fortunately, but I guess for you that you weren't there 24/7. So, um, even for the caregivers that are there
Yeah.
24/7, what worked for you or what would you suggest as far as maybe like the self-care aspect or even something
Yeah.
where it could help your mindset during the process? Because I'm sure there's a lot of hard moments and struggles that go
Yeah.
along with that.
100%. I think one of the biggest things for me, and I'm just going to back up a second, is that when I fell into caregiving at 29, I never self identified as a quote unquote caregiver. Because in my mind, caregivers were in their 60s and their 70s. They were caring for spouses, or maybe even in their 50s, caring for parents. So here at 29 years old or in your 30s, it's really hard to imagine yourself as a caregiver because of this like caregiver persona, I guess, that's out there. So I never self identified as a caregiver. And I think that was a huge game changer for me when I actually saw myself as a caregiver, just opposed to a good daughter or a spouse or whatever situation you might be in. Because when I self identified as a caregiver, it it made me seek out more resources. It made me identify that I needed to take care of myself. It made me see that, okay, you are a caregiver, you're a daughter, you're a great daughter, but you can't do this all on your own. I think as women, whether it's with our children or with our families or with our parents, we think we can take on the world. And usually we can to a certain extent, but there's also that big thing called burnout, no matter what situation you're in with kids, as a caregiver, to parents, to spouses. And burnout is a real thing. So, two things I had to learn very quickly were to ask for help. And these two things are going to sound so cliche because I know in life it's like, oh, asking for help. I don't want to ask for help. I don't want to bother anyone. But asking for help as a caregiver is so essential. And if that help comes in the form of a family member who might be able to come and sit with your loved one for a couple hours while you just go out and run some errands, or you actually take that time to just do something for yourself, that is essential. If you are afforded the means to bring in a home health aide, somebody that might be able to come for half a day, it doesn't have to be 24/7 because I know it can get super expensive, but half a day, 3 times a week, just to be able to give you that time back. I think that is essential because there's that phrase, I think it's something to the extent of you have to make sure that your cup is filled or before you can give unto others. Something to that extent, like we need to ensure that we are filled up and that we're in a good place so that we can now take that and care for the person that we're caring with to the best of our ability. So asking for help, accepting help, like that's something that I never did. Even though I didn't have family close by, my girlfriends were like my family. And they would always say, like, my mom would go to the ER. Can we bring you dinner? Can we come sit with you? And I would always say, no, 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 no. But what if I would have just said yes? What if I would have said yes, right? Because they would have never asked if they didn't really want to help. So I think that's huge, especially for us as women. Again, they say, especially as a caregiver, self-care is so cliche. But again, it's essential. And I know, especially if you're a 24/7 caregiver, it's very, very hard to get any time for yourself. But I come from the mindset of everybody has 10 minutes in the morning. Like, just sit on the edge of your bed. For me, like, I'm very into meditation and deep breathing and really just getting in that place of calm and quiet really helped to block out all the noise and the anxiety and really set my day up for success. So even if it's taking 10 minutes to do that, I like to journal, especially like when it comes to gratitude. So every morning I would sit with my journal for 5 minutes and I would just write down all the things I'm grateful for, because in my care journey, I went through a phase of why me? Why me? Why is this happening to me? Like, why am I putting my life on hold? Like, why am I not moving forward with life like all of my friends and everybody else I'm seeing on social media? So, starting to focus on what I do have and the things that I'm grateful for really helped to pull me out of that why me phase of my life in caregiving. So I would say those are two really big things. And honestly, at the end of the day, whatever like lights you up, whatever fills your cup. For me, living in Miami, I live 10 minutes from the beach. I used to live right across the street from the beach. So taking a walk on the beach, being out in nature, like whatever that is for you, if you want to find the time to do something, you will make it happen. And I'm saying as a caregiver, find that time, prioritize yourself, and just make it happen.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. And I think it goes similar to that thing, like, you can't give from an empty cup.
Yeah, that's it.
And like you said, if you're burnt out, you're tired, you're stressed, you're overwhelmed, how can you possibly have that energy to put in the work to take care of someone else, to make a
Right.
phone call for someone, to go to an appointment, to
Mhm.
get information about something because your mind is not functioning because you didn't allow yourself to kind of refuel on the inside. So I really do like that. And then I think the other part of that is like, then your cup spills over. So when it
Right.
gets to a good point, then you can
Mhm.
share that. And I think the thing about asking for help, or not necessarily asking for help, but when your friends offer to
Mhm.
help, when people do that and we say no to
Right.
them, it kinda makes them feel bad
Yes.
because they want to help you.
Mhm.
And then when you say yes, the thing is that fills their cup. And
Yeah.
I think because the times that you've probably helped your friends out, right? And you're
Mhm.
like, "Wow, I did a good thing." And I think we all it's kinda like that circle. We all need that from each other in order to kinda keep growing and keep shining our light. So when people help us, it helps fill them up fill them up
Yeah.
too on the inside. So we're trying to help everybody, right?
It's so true. Yeah, and I think especially in a caregiver role, in a role where maybe you don't have a lot of friends that can really relate to what you're going through, it's like they don't know what to do, right? They want to help you, but they don't know what to do. So if it's something as simple as bringing over a hot meal or taking you to the movies for an hour or asking you, "Hey, can you break away for a walk?" or even saying like, "Can I come over? Can I come visit your mom or your dad or your spouse?" Just being able to do something like that actually, to your point, makes them feel better because then they feel like they're actually able to do something for you in a situation where they feel helpless, if that makes sense.
Yeah, totally. And one last thing, I guess, before we kind of get off of here, because you've made some really good points, and I just know there's so much that we can go into.
Mhm.
You spend your time as a professional speaker and you're an
Mhm.
ambassador. I want to know I know your experience is part of what drives you, but what is it and how is it that you speak to our community? And what is the passion behind that? What message are you trying to get out to the members of our community that are going to be caregivers or just to prepare them to become one? Or if they're going through it right now?
Yeah, I am really fueled by the fact that when I fell into caregiving at a young age, I felt like I was the only one. In a world of however many millions and millions of people live in this world, I honestly felt like I was the only one that was going through this. When the reality is, there are so many people who are in this journey. There's a saying like either you are a caregiver, you were a caregiver, or you will become a caregiver. So, whether that's for a parent, a spouse, a child, everyone will fall into caregiving at some point in their life. And what really motivated me to drive this passion forward was just seeing how many young caregivers specifically are out there that feel isolated, they feel alone, they don't know where to turn to because so many of us are just thrust into this journey. We're young, we don't have anyone to ask like, how did you do it? It's a little bit different when you're a young caregiver versus a young parent. For me, if I were to become a mom now, I have tons of friends who have kids. I can just reach out and say, hey, this is going on, this is going on. Caregiving, I don't have any friends who I can reach out to and ask that. So I think just the need to make it more well known that there are so many younger caregivers, and it's not just people in their 50s and 60s and 70s who are starting to care. And that's really my passion, because I didn't have that, and I saw what I went through and what I had to go through to get resources and get information and seek support. So for me now, it's like I want to help current caregivers and future caregivers not have to go through that struggle, because it's already such an incredible emotional roller coaster as it is to see someone you love and who used to be very, very different. Now the roles are reversing, and that's a really hard thing to see. So being able to provide support in other ways so that you're able just to tend to like your emotional and mental well-being is really what fuels me in speaking, in getting my story out on podcasts like yours, and really just raising the profile of young caregivers.
Thank goodness for people like you. Thank goodness for you, because that is a true help. And you want to be that person that you didn't have.
Exactly.
And I think the more awareness that comes with that and the more support. And one of the things that I love is I listened to a couple of episodes on your podcast, and I'm going to give you a second also to share your contact information, your social media, and your podcast information with our listeners, because, like I said, there's so much that we can dive into with this.
Mm-hmm.
But some of the important things that you touch on, and it really brings it down to reality, and you really can set people at ease with the comfort of knowing like some of their thoughts, the thought process that goes on, the things. I mean, I'm not going to say it, but I want the listeners to go to your podcast and listen to your episode. And there's one in particular. I got to listen to all of them, but there's one in particular about I think it's the things that
It's the
we
things
don't
we don't
say,
say out loud. Right.
right?
Yeah.
Which is great for being in that caregiving role, for especially if you're taking care of someone that you love.
Mm-hmm.
But then it's also a reminder for a lot of things in life in general of what you go through. So I would highly, highly encourage our listeners to check out your podcast, because you dive so deep into that.
Mm-hmm.
And honestly, it feels when you're talking to people and you're speaking from your heart, it really feels like a warm hug that comes out.
Mm-hmm.
So I can only imagine the people that are in it, that are going through it, to hear that coming from you.
Mm-hmm.
That's why I'm so grateful for the vehicles that we can use to share that message. And that's why I'm so thankful to have you on the show and have our listeners get in touch with you.
Mm-hmm.
Before we do that, number one, I didn't ask you what your favorite cup of coffee is, if you have one, and what sparks happiness for you.
Oh, all right. So cup of coffee. I am very non-vanilla in every aspect of my life, specifically my red hair. But honestly, when it comes to coffee, like I just like a straight up cup of dark coffee, but I do love like my flavored, excuse me, creamers. So like right now I'm on the pumpkin spice bandwagon. So, but just kind of a straight up nice, strong, bold cup of coffee is my go-to. And I need my
Yeah.
coffee. Like I am a zombie until I have my coffee in the morning. Like don't talk to me until I've had at least 2 cups.
Yes.
And then the second one was what lights like a spark?
What sparks happiness
Ooh,
for
what sparks
you?
happiness? I
And I
mean,
think, honestly, I'm really touched that you'll be able to answer this question on the Happy Girl podcast, especially like you're saying with the story of where you're at right now. I would love to hear what sparks that for you.
a lot of things spark happiness, but I would say predominantly right now in my life, probably what makes me happier more than anything is knowing that I've touched and reached one person. The messages that I get in my Instagram direct messages or on Facebook from other young caregivers who have said, I read one of your posts, I listened to one of your podcast episodes. I can't even tell you what a relief I'm feeling right now that I found somebody out there who gets it. And for me, doing all the things that I do, of course, I want to reach the masses, but I've always said, like, if I can touch the heart and change the life of just one person, then that's all I need. So that happiness is like 20-fold every time I get one of those messages, because it just validates the work that I'm doing and that I'm going the right direction. And more than anything, that more of this work needs to be done.
Yeah, I love that. And it's such an honor for you and an honor to your mom as well. So that is something that is truly special. And a reminder too, people are watching, people are listening. And with social media, I know as an entrepreneur, as a podcast host, as someone that tries to share the message and tries to share the story, sometimes you might not see the heart in red.
Exactly.
Sometimes you might not see the comments
Yep.
or even the views on your stories, but people are listening, people are watching, and sometimes they're not so quick to engage. It is special that you get those messages. That's great. But I think the thing is, people are listening and watching, and everything that you're doing is definitely for a higher cause. And you're doing a wonderful job at that. I'm already excited to continue staying in touch with you and keep on listening to more episodes from your podcast and just staying connected and following your journey. And any way that I can support you and share the love, I'm totally happy to do that. So with that being said, share how the listeners can find you in all the ways.
Of course. So you can find me on Instagram and Facebook. It's at Young Life Interrupted. You can also find me on Apple Podcasts and Spotify. I have the Young Life Interrupted podcast. And if you are a young caregiver that's listening and you are looking for support, I also have a private Facebook group for young caregivers. Again, Young Life Interrupted. And you can feel free to join us in there.
I think that's great. And we'll definitely have the link in the episode on happygirlpodcast.com. So I really appreciate having you on the show, Adrienne. It means so much to me, and I'm sure our listeners are going to fall in love with hearing your story. And hopefully we just all continue to share the love and share the light together.
That's what matters at the end of the day. Thank you so much, Jamie.
Thank you. And if you want to reference this episode and so much more, head on over to happygirlpodcast.com. I'm over here giving you the biggest virtual hug because you just finished another episode of the Happy Girl Podcast. Wow. Did that just go by way too fast? If you want more, head over to happygirlpodcast.com for show notes and discount codes from all of the sponsors. And if you're looking for a tribe of women just like you to bounce ideas and ask questions, be sure to join my exclusive community on Facebook. The link is waiting for you at happygirlpodcast.com.